I'm not a dramatic man. I've never raised my voice in public, never once threatened to burn it all down, like you hear in those internet stories. I'm the kind of guy who files his taxes in February, triple checks the lock on the front door before bed, and still keeps paper receipts in a little accordion folder I bought at Staples in 2004. My name's Mark Thompson. I'm 49, born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin. Been living in Indianapolis for the last 20 years with my wife, Linda, and our 2 kids. Or at least I thought I was living with my wife. Now I look back and I wonder just how long she'd been in the house with me, but not with me. Up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life. Solid job in IT risk consulting. Nothing glamorous, but I was well respected. Spoke at a few conferences, mentored younger guys coming up in the field. I had a reputation for being dependable. Maybe that was my greatest strength. Maybe it was my blind spot. Back in September, I started getting this cough, dry, persistent. At first, I chalked it up to allergies or too much coffee, but it didn't go away. Then came the fatigue, bone-deep exhaustion, like my body wasn't mine anymore. I finally went to the doctor, got a scan, and a week later, I was sitting across from a pulmonologist with a tight look on his face. Stage 2, non-small cell lung cancer. I sat there blinking at him like he'd just told me I'd won a vacation I didn't remember entering. The plan was surgery, remove part of my upper left lobe. Aggressive but doable. And I was optimistic. Scared, of course, but focused. That's how I handle stress. I make lists, plans, flowcharts even. Linda was by my side, or at least I thought she was. She drove me to the appointments, sat with me during the biopsy consult. She even picked up one of those stupid Fight Like Hell t-shirts at Target and gave it to me the night before the operation. I didn't wear it, I'm not a slogan guy, but I appreciated the gesture, or I thought I did. Now it feels like a punchline to a sick joke. The morning of the surgery, I was fasting, groggy. Already I V'd up. My phone buzzed from the side table, just once. I wasn't supposed to have it, but I'd slipped it into my gown pocket earlier when the nurse wasn't looking. A habit, I guess. I wanted to be reachable in case the kids messaged me, or the office needed something. Maybe I just wanted to feel like I still had control over something in my life. As they wheeled me down the corridor, the surgeon leaned in and said, "We'll take care of you. Just relax." I nodded, trying to smile behind the anxiety ballooning in my chest. Then the buzz came again, this time in my hand. I pulled the phone up one last time before they'd take it away, and I saw a single text from Linda. No greeting, no context. Just words I still can't believe were real. "Mark, I don't know if you'll survive this surgery. I'm flying to Rome tomorrow with Jake. I'm taking my half of the money. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore." That was it. No, I love you. No, let's talk later. No, I hope you wake up. It took my brain a full 10 seconds to even compute what I was looking at. I remember the white hall lights flickering above me as the gurney slowed near the OR doors. I remember the smell, antiseptic and metal, but mostly I remember the sensation of being dropped through the center of the earth, like my stomach had just disappeared, like gravity itself betrayed me. Jake, that name. It snapped into place before I even finished the text. Jake Carter, 24 years old, studying art history at IU, one of our daughter's classmates. He'd been to our house, used to come by during breaks, hang out, drink lemonade on the back porch with his ridiculous man bun and vintage camera. I thought he was harmless, just a kid. I'd offered him advice about internships. At Christmas, I gave him one of my old Nikon lenses, thinking I was encouraging his dreams. God help me, I even wrote him a recommendation letter for a study abroad grant. And now he was flying to Rome, with my wife, on my dime, while I lay on a table about to have a piece of my body cut out in a desperate attempt to stay alive. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I couldn't. The nurses were already beginning the countdown. Oxygen was flowing, and the world was slipping away like water down a drain. My last conscious act before surgery. I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my pocket. Some part of me knew this wasn't just a betrayal. This was an ambush, a coordinated timed attack at my most vulnerable. She waited for this moment, planned it. Probably had the flight booked days ago, maybe weeks. She knew I couldn't fight back, knew I wouldn't be able to call the bank, lock the accounts, freeze the credit cards, call my lawyer. Hell, I couldn't even breathe on my own, let alone make legal decisions. And still, I didn't cry. That came later. When I woke up in recovery, hours later, groggy and weak and hooked up to half a dozen tubes, my sister was sitting at my bedside. She was the one who saw the text first when she picked up my phone to call my son. I'll never forget the look on her face. Not shock, not horror, rage. Pure, silent rage. She handed me the phone with trembling hands, and I read the message again. Slower this time, word by word, like I was translating a dead language. And then, quietly, so quietly the nurses didn't even look up, I said, "Okay." That's all I said, "Okay." Because what Linda didn't know was that while she may have left me broken, she didn't leave me stupid. And if she thought she was walking away clean with my money, my trust fund, and the boy toy she smuggled out of our daughter's college dorm, she had another thing coming. They say recovery is supposed to be the hard part, learning how to breathe again, how to sit up without feeling like your ribs are about to tear open. But for me, the hardest part wasn't the physical pain. It was waking up after surgery to a world that looked the same, but where everything I knew had been flipped upside down. I came to slowly, the haze of anesthesia still heavy in my head. I remember the nurse's voice calling my name softly, the gentle pressure on my arm. My mouth was dry as cotton, throat raw from the breathing tube, chest sore from where they'd cut in. But I was alive. That was something. And then I turned my head and saw my phone on the rolling tray beside the bed. I reached for it, hand trembling, not because I expected anything in particular, but because I wanted to see a message from Linda. Something simple. "We're here. We love you. Can't wait to see you." That's what I hoped for. Instead, the screen lit up with a single text. One I'd never forget as long as I live. "Mark, I don't know if you'll survive. I'm sorry, but I can't keep living like this. I'm leaving. By the time you read this, I'll be on a plane to Rome with Ryan. We've transferred the funds. I'm taking what I need. Don't try to stop us." At first I thought maybe I was still groggy, hallucinating. Maybe the drugs were making me see things. But no, there it was, cold, clear, brutal. She didn't even sign her name. Just walked out digitally like I was a tenant she was evicting. The weight of that message, I felt it more than I felt the incision across my side. There was no anger yet, no rage, just a silence so deep inside me it echoed. The nurses came in and out. One helped me sit up, another changed my IV. I nodded, followed instructions, did what I had to. I was a good patient, polite, cooperative. On the outside, I was calm. Inside, I was drowning. Linda and I had built a life together. 19 years of marriage, 2 kids, 3 houses over the years, 2 dogs, countless vacations, laughter, late nights planning our future, and all of that, gone in a single message. She hadn't even waited to see if I'd wake up. That first night after reading the text, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding beneath bandages. I thought about our son Jack, a sophomore in college, and Emily, just 14, still clinging to the edges of childhood. What would I tell them? How would I shield them from this? The betrayal wasn't just against me, it was against the family, the future we all depended on. But I didn't cry. That was the strange thing. I felt hollow, like my emotions were frozen. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was something deeper, a quiet kind of resolve taking root. I've always been a planner, a systems guy, COO for a mid-sized logistics firm for nearly a decade. In my world, you don't react. You assess. You strategize. You move with intent. And as I lay there in that hospital bed, with tubes in my arms and betrayal in my chest, I started thinking like a businessman again. The first question was, what does she have access to? I knew Linda still had power of attorney. That was a mistake, and one I'd now have to fix, fast. I knew our main joint account, the one we used for everything from groceries to tuition, had well over $240,000 in it. Our brokerage account, mostly long-term holdings, wasn't liquid, but she'd never been interested in managing that. Still, if she had a smart advisor, they could do some real damage. And the trust fund, the one my parents had set up for our kids. That had stipulations, and I'd made sure it couldn't be touched casually, but Linda was nothing if not persuasive, especially with young, arrogant guys who wanted a taste of comfort without earning it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her on that plane with him, Ryan, barely older than Jack. He was probably sending Instagram stories from the airport, sipping champagne on my dime. The humiliation burned, but I kept it buried. Over the next few days, I said nothing to the nurses, nothing to my sister when she visited. When my friend Daniel stopped by with flowers, I smiled and thanked him, acted like everything was fine. No one knew what I was holding inside, because now wasn't the time to fall apart. Now was the time to get smart. Between physical therapy sessions and meals I could barely eat, I began to plan. I asked the night nurse to help me get my laptop from the locker. She hesitated, said I shouldn't work. I told her I needed it for insurance paperwork. That was half true. I started mapping out every account, every password, every legal document I'd need to revisit. And I began drafting an email, not one I'd send just yet, but one that would become the first domino in a chain of consequences I intended to trigger. That email was to my lawyer, a man I hadn't spoken to in years, but I'd kept him on retainer quietly, just in case. And now, I was very glad I had. There was no screaming, no drama, just me, lying there with bandages across my chest, planning a counterstrike like a general in retreat, one who knew the terrain better than anyone else. I didn't know what shape my life would take after this. I didn't know how deep Linda's betrayal went, or how long she'd been planning it. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to be the sad story she told over pasta and wine in some Roman cafe. I wasn't going to be the man she left behind without a fight. I was going to rise. Quietly, yes, but powerfully. And when I did, she'd regret thinking I wouldn't survive. When you've spent your whole life building something, your marriage, your finances, your home, and someone tries to rip it all away with a single message while you're unconscious on an operating table, you don't just sit there and take it, not if you've still got breath in your lungs. The morning after I regained full awareness, a nurse brought me my phone and a charger. She said something kind, probably about getting some rest, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing. My fingers were trembling, not from the anesthesia or the pain meds, but from sheer adrenaline. It wasn't just grief anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was purpose. I'd been blindsided once. I wouldn't let it happen again. I remember the first thing I did was open the banking app, and right there it was. Our main checking account, the one Linda and I shared for over 20 years, was almost empty. I blinked at the screen like I was hallucinating. $216. That was it. The savings account we used for our kids' college fund, gutted. Retirement investments, transferred. There was even a notification I hadn't seen. A wire transfer to an account I didn't recognize, listed under a business name I'd never heard of. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took a deep breath, propped myself up with a pillow, and grabbed the cheap hospital notepad from the tray beside me. I started making a list. I wasn't sure what I was doing at first, just jotting down names. People I trusted, people who owed me favors. People who knew how to move quickly and quietly in situations like this. The first call was to David Miller, an old friend and the attorney who helped me settle a nasty contractor lawsuit a few years back. The guy was sharp, quiet, and didn't rattle easily. I left him a voicemail at 6:43 a.m., just said, "David, it's urgent. Family matter. Call me the second you get this." Then I dialed Teresa McCallan, my financial advisor. She picked up on the second ring. She knew my voice. "Mark, you okay? I heard about the surgery." "I'm okay," I said, "but I need your help. Immediately." Teresa didn't waste time with small talk. I told her what I'd seen in the accounts. She asked me to forward screenshots and email any suspicious transactions I could find. "We'll freeze anything that's left and start a full transaction audit. And Mark, if your wife's doing this without your consent, there may be criminal exposure." She didn't sugarcoat it. That's why I called her. Meanwhile, I texted my brother Jeff. Jeff had been a cop for 20 years. Homicide, narcotics, fraud. Now he ran his own PI firm in Ohio. If anyone could pull the curtain back on Linda and her boyfriend's plans, it was him. I sent a simple message. "Need your eyes on Linda. She's running off with a 24-year-old and cleaning us out. Think you can dig into her travel, financials, and his background? Quietly." Jeff responded 4 minutes later. "Say no more. I'm on it. I'll start with her phone records and dig into the guy." That day was the longest I'd spent awake since the operation. Every spare moment between nurses and rounds was spent documenting, calling, piecing things together. My arms ached, but I wrote everything down. Linda's sudden trips in the last month, the new business advisor she'd mentioned 2 weeks before surgery, the new credit card she applied for and told me not to worry about. Little red flags I'd ignored. But now I was connecting the dots. By evening, Teresa had found 2 shell companies tied to the wire transfers. One was based in Nevada, typical tax haven. The other, registered in Rome, where she told me she was going to clear her head. David called back later that night with a list of emergency legal steps we could take, revoking Linda's durable power of attorney, securing a temporary restraining order to freeze joint assets, and starting discovery proceedings for asset misappropriation. He told me he'd file everything first thing in the morning, and Jeff? He was already 2 steps ahead. He'd pulled flight manifests, confirming that Linda and her boyfriend Ryan had tickets booked for Rome in 2 days, first class, one way. He even had a blurry DMV photo of Ryan. The kid looked like he hadn't shaved in a week and wore a suit that didn't fit. But what really made my skin crawl? Jeff discovered that Ryan had a sealed juvenile record, something serious. He couldn't get details, but it wasn't traffic tickets. I spent that night staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep, not because of the pain, but because I knew how close I had come to losing it all. I thought about my kids, about our home, about every dollar I'd worked for, about how Linda, the woman I once trusted more than anyone on earth, had plotted this escape with a kid half her age while I was in a surgical gown fighting for my life. But I didn't let the bitterness consume me. I let it drive me. By the end of the next day, I had more than just information. I had leverage. The accounts were locked down. The paperwork was in motion. And Jeff had compiled a quiet dossier on Ryan that, if made public, would ensure no legitimate employer ever touched him again. I was still in a hospital gown. I was still healing. But piece by piece, I was taking back control. They thought they'd catch me slipping. They thought they'd be on a beach in Italy sipping wine on my dime. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't dead. And I sure as hell wasn't done. It was sometime after lunch. If you could call the clear broth they fed me lunch. I was still coming out of the haze of post-op painkillers, the low mechanical hum of the IV monitor like a background drumbeat to the stillness. The nurses had just left after checking my vitals, and I was alone in my hospital room, flipping slowly through the pages of a financial report my attorney had emailed me, the same attorney who was now working overtime to untangle the knot Linda had made of our life. Then I heard it. The soft ding of the elevator down the hall, followed by rushed, almost panicked footsteps. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. There they stood, Linda first, dressed in a designer trench coat that still had the boutique tag on it. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying, but she still had lipstick on, as if she'd debated whether to look devastated or composed and chose both. And behind her, Ryan, 24. Wearing a backward baseball cap, like he was walking into a dorm room, not a hospital. His face was drawn, sickly pale, the confidence he'd likely strutted through customs with, already melting under fluorescent lighting and the weight of reality. In their hands, luggage, 2 large designer suitcases, packed, wheels still dusted with whatever grime the Atlanta airport leaves behind. For a moment, we just looked at each other. No words, just silence. And then Linda broke. She dropped to her knees. Literally dropped. Like the air had been pulled from her, and she didn't know what else to do. She grabbed the side of my bed like she was clinging to the edge of a cliff. "Mark, please," she choked out, voice trembling. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." I didn't say anything. Just watched, took in every detail, her manicured hands, the designer bag over her shoulder. Ryan's guilty eyes darting toward the floor like he wanted to disappear into the tile. They hadn't expected this. Not me awake, not me calm, not me in control. She kept talking, words spilling out like a dam had burst. "I didn't know you'd pull through. I panicked. I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought maybe you were going to die. And I didn't want to waste another year of my life waiting around to be alone. I know that sounds awful, but I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly." And then the real truth slipped out. Rome was his idea. She pointed at Ryan without looking. He said we should start over, a new life. He said we could live off the accounts, that everything was already in motion. So there it was, confirmation, not speculation, not paranoia, but confession. I looked Ryan dead in the eye. "You thought you could run off with my money while I was unconscious in a hospital bed?" He flinched, didn't respond, just stared at the linoleum. His foot twitched like he was ready to bolt. But there was nowhere to run now. Not from the call I'd made that morning to my lawyer, or the quiet freeze order we'd placed on the joint accounts, or the forensic accountant currently tracing every transaction they'd tried to hide. Linda finally stood up, brushing her knees off like it would somehow clean the shame from them. "We didn't get far," she said, voice low. "At the airport, there was a hold on my card. Everything flagged. Your brother's name was on the no-access list for the trust. We didn't even make it to check-in before I knew it was over." "You really thought you'd outplay me?" I asked, finally letting the words come. My voice was calm, but sharp as broken glass. "You thought I'd lie in this bed and die while you drained everything we spent 20 years building." Her face collapsed, tears now coming freely. "I'm sorry. I am. I don't even know who I am anymore." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel the pain. I didn't feel the weakness in my chest or the ache in my scar. I felt clarity, cold, clear, unshakable clarity. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't owe you anything anymore. Not forgiveness, not explanations, and certainly not a second chance." They didn't argue. They didn't beg again. Not with words. They just stood there, silent, holding on to the handles of their suitcases, full of clothes for a future they'd never get to live. Eventually, I turned my head and pressed the nurse call button. "I think we're done here," I told them. "Security will see you out." And when they were gone, I laid back and let out the first full breath I'd taken since waking from surgery, because now I wasn't just recovering from cancer, I was healing from betrayal, and I was ready for war. After the shock of that hospital confrontation faded, what followed was the part I never thought I'd willingly dive into again. The legal battle. The very word, courtroom, used to make me recoil, but now it was the only place I could find justice, reclaim what was mine, and protect my children's future. I remember the first meeting like it was yesterday. It was in a sterile, high-rise conference room downtown. The walls were glass, the skyline sprawling behind us, mocking me with its cold indifference. Around the large oak table sat my lawyer, a sharp woman named Lisa who smelled like coffee and determination, the family's financial advisor, a man named Jerry, who'd been managing our trusts since before my cancer diagnosis, and, of course, my brother Tom, who'd come to offer support. On the other side, Linda's legal team. They were calm, polished, rehearsed, and ready to fight like lions protecting a kill. Lisa opened the session by sliding a thick folder toward the center of the table. "These documents," she said, voice low but firm, "are the results of the forensic audit we commissioned last week. They show a clear trail of unauthorized withdrawals, suspicious transfers, and attempted diversion of funds into accounts linked to your wife and her boyfriend. We have timestamps, transaction receipts, emails, even witness testimonies. It's all here." I picked up the folder. The paper felt heavy, not just physically, but with the weight of betrayal and the hard work it took to expose it. Every page told a story Linda had tried to erase with lies and greed. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Linda's lead attorney, a silver-haired man with a practiced smile, spoke up. "Mark, your wife has expressed remorse and willingness to settle. Litigation will only drain resources and damage the family further. We propose a mediation." I looked around. Everyone was waiting for my response. And that's when something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about truth, about making sure that neither Linda nor Ryan ever had a chance to hurt me, or my children, again. "No," I said, voice steady and clear. "We're going to court, and we're going to make sure every last dollar is accounted for. No shortcuts, no deals behind closed doors." Over the next several weeks, the battle intensified. There were deposition sessions where Linda had to answer questions under oath, questions about secret trips, unexplained expenses, and the moment she first planned to leave me. Ryan was subpoenaed too, but he barely showed up, always sick or unavailable. It became obvious he wanted nothing more than to vanish. Lisa and I built our case piece by piece. We introduced bank statements, private emails, text messages, some so cold they made my skin crawl. But What helped most was the unwavering support from my family and a few close friends who stepped up as witnesses. They reminded me I wasn't alone, even when Linda tried to paint me as the villain, desperate to punish a woman in pain. The final hearing was a grueling marathon. For hours, lawyers argued, evidence was examined, and emotions ran high. But I stayed composed. I had to. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my kids, my legacy, and my sanity. When the judge finally ruled, it was a victory. The court awarded me full control over the family trust, froze any assets Linda tried to move, and mandated a substantial settlement paid back to the accounts I managed. Linda's custody rights were also restricted, ensuring the children's stability. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming mix of relief and exhaustion. But more than anything, I felt vindicated. This wasn't just a legal win. It was a reclaiming of my life. I had survived surgery, betrayal, and heartbreak. And now, I was ready to rebuild stronger than ever. Leaving the hospital, I felt like I had a fresh start. The surgery had taken a toll on my body, but my spirit was stronger than ever. My kids and close family were there, reminding me what really mattered: love, support, and hope. I focused on healing, both physically and emotionally, making sure to put my health first. I spent more time with my children, rebuilding our lives one day at a time, showing them they could count on me no matter what. Work became a place to regain purpose. I took it slow, leaned on friends, and even mentored others, sharing what I'd learned about resilience. Most importantly, I forgave myself. I realized that what happened wasn't my fault, and moving forward meant letting go of bitterness. That dark chapter taught me something vital. Strength isn't about never falling, but rising every time you do. Now, I'm stepping into the future, ready for whatever comes next, healthier, wiser, and more determined.